Today, we're going to further demonstrate how we don't miss uploads. Welcome to Catching You Up with
Nadav. It's COVID.
Now, I was going to cover Skankfest in Vegas this week, and unfortunately, I had to cancel my trip this year due to last-minute personal reasons, but was still going to cover it. And luckily, Skankfest streams on mintcomedy.com, and you're able to catch a couple shows a day for a 3-day pass, and it's high quality, it sounds great, it looks great. Honestly, it's worth the money. Seeing the gun in the butt trilogy play out between Louis J. Gomez and Big J. Okerson was incredible. And I'm not gonna lie, this new show out of Gas Digital, Story Wars, might be my new favorite podcast of the year. And this shit had me rolling over. I love the concept, I love the banter, and I just love the structure of the show. And of course, watching Louis J. Gomez's 45 minutes of coke magic was one of the funniest possible things I think I've seen so far in the stream. It's just good show. It's very fun. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Nadav, you haven't even said who the executive producer of this episode is yet. We'll get to that in a little bit. But at Skankfest, there's things that you see on the stream that just don't translate from actually being there physically. Like last year, Joe DeRosa went backstage with a seemingly very nice trans lady, where they did hand and mouth stuff in a janitor's closet, and then that was referenced pretty much every show moving forward from when that happened. And the thing that was the funniest to me was that I was backstage getting a drink, and I see DeRosa just wear a shirt that says, "I'm not gay." Mix that with comedians bringing it up as a jab to DeRosa, and then Ian Fidance legitimately getting upset at anyone that isn't fully accepting of anything on the LGBTQ spectrum. It was great. It was great. I highly recommend it. If you're an actual comedy fan and like actual comedy, Skankfest is something that should be very high on your bucket list. It is your favorite comedian's favorite comedy festival. Legion of Skanks and their crew are constantly innovating and catering to the best comedy crowds in the world. Unless you took too much of something, it's pretty hard to have a bad time over there. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw a couple overdoses when I was there last year, but you know what? There was a whole bunch of people around taking care of that person. They also had fentanyl testing tents, which I think is wildly responsible and honestly really fucking cool. I was way too afraid to take any drugs that were handed to me, but it's cool that other people had other plans. It's alright guys, I went to the dispensary before this, I'm good on whatever you're about to give me. I think I even remember Lewis bragging at Legion of Skank episode where he said, "Hey doggy, we have a fentanyl testing tent and actually someone tested positive, so we saved someone's life." And then one of his producers told him, actually, that person got escorted out of the festival to the point where he was like, hold on. You mean to tell me that he tested his drugs, they tested positive for fentanyl, and then he did them anyway? And then I think it was explained to him, and I might be remembering this wrong, but it was explained to him, no, the drugs tested positive for fentanyl, and he got so upset that he paid for bad drugs that he just started drinking heavily and drank so much that he became a menace and had to be escorted out of the festival, which is like, you know, drinking too much alcohol is always better than taking too much fentanyl. So let's just accept the silver lining for what it is. All I'm saying is that Skankfest is the real deal of comedy festivals. And if you're a comedy fan, you need to go. I'm sure Joke World is going to be coming out with some content of him being boots on the ground and interviewing a whole bunch of comedians that rolled through. Go ahead, give that a watch. And with that being said, Skankfest was one of the first things I reported on when I started this show, Catching You Up with Nadav, available every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. We don't miss uploads. It's pretty much been a full year of me doing this on my own, and I've found more fulfillment and happiness in making my own content and independently consulting for clients that I personally enjoy working with. And I couldn't be more thankful for the people out there that are supporting me while I'm going on this journey. That means you. And I'm not going to blow the fans too hard, but I will say that I appreciate you and your support. It sincerely means the world to me. And with that, a lot of you know I start my episodes with thanking the executive producer, who is someone that I pull at random from the highest level on my Patreon, and then I make up some story of like, man, if it wasn't for so-and-so, I'd probably be out back, you know, selling kidneys to to the highest bidder. Or, you know, some other like terrible scheme at making money that, you know, isn't good in the long run, but they're all stupid. And I thought, what better way to celebrate a year of doing this than compiling some of the best and funniest ones for all you guys to watch. And with that, let's get into some of this year's best executive producers that have helped me from some of the worst money-making schemes that I've come up with. But before we get into showing you just a string out of all the executive producers that have helped over the year, I want to thank everyone that you're seeing on screen right now who are lower level producers but still high enough to have their names engraved in eternity in every single episode of this show. And I'd like to say thank you for your support, and if you'd like to be one of those people, again, click the Patreon link in the description below. And yeah, guys, thanks for a great year, and here's to many more. Appreciate you. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Eric Bay. Without his big baller support, I would probably be at every poker room in Austin, Texas, turning my fake gambling problem into a real gambling problem. First, I'd like to say that this episode is executive produced by my big baller executive producer, Stoned Ape Canico. Without the support of Stoned Ape Canico, I'd probably be underneath this city sewers doing questionable things to make ends meet. But because of my executive producers, I'm not doing that stuff. I would like to thank the executive producer of this episode, David Finkel. Without his help, I would probably be snatching up Shane Gillis tickets on his normal comedy club site and then reselling them for about 20 times face value to unsuspecting fans. But because of David Finkel, I don't have to do that. I'd like to say that this episode is executive produced by Colin Haley. Without his big baller support, I would probably be traveling all over the world creating sleeper cells of pickpockets that kind of just mail somewhere between 10 to 50% of everything they pickpocket over to HQ. But because of Colin Haley, I don't have to be involved in all that grand larceny. Firstly, I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, G-Baba. Without their big baller support, putting on this show regularly would be a much harder task. But because of G-Baba, I am not on the streets at night performing favors to transients. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Wolfski Comedy. Without their help, I'd probably be lingering around parking lots as people parked and told them, hey, you know, I'm not necessarily the security of this parking lot per se, but if you know, I will look after to make sure no one messes with your car. And if you want to pay me something for that, I will do that, but you know, I don't work for the parking lot. But because of Wolfski Comedy, I don't have to do that. Boy, that was really specific, and yes, that does happen here in downtown Austin. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this week's episode, David Finkel. Without his big baller support, I'd probably be trying to figure out the actual merits of counting cards and blackjack, and if I could actually get enough of a team that I could trust to go to Vegas with, and actually, like, you know, bring back like 20 to 30K at a time. But if we do bigger bets, we could probably bring in bigger hauls, and you really just do that like 4 to 6 times a year, and you're making pretty decent money. But because of David Finkel, I don't have to do that. Thank you, David, and your big baller support. I would like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Average Ed. Without the big baller support of Average Ed, I would probably be dumpster diving behind Apple stores, just trying to find empty boxes of Apple iPhones and then kind of add some weight to them and then selling all those on eBay. Sure, some of them might come back and ask for refunds, but a lot of them might not. But because of Average Ed, I'm not locked up in appeals court trying to make sure I'm holding on to all the money I'm making. This episode is executive produced by the one and only Colin Haley. Without the big baller support of Colin Haley, I'd probably be crafting very enticing and suggestive emails that I would then blast out to as many people as possible with a phishing link.
that if you clicked on it, boom, I get all of your information, and then boom, I sell it to third parties, and then boom, they sell it to Nigerian princes. So, luckily for me and for you, I have Colin Haley's Big Baller support, so I don't need to do that stuff. I'd like to thank the executive producer of today's episode, Wolfsky Comedy. Without the Big Baller support of Wolfsky Comedy, I'd probably be an international man, running all sorts of call centers, most likely in India, Portugal, Brazil, places like this, things like that. And to get my workforce of call centers to call and prey on as many elderly folk as possible, where, you know, they're alleging to be representatives of Microsoft or the IRS, and that, you know, we need a large amount of Cheesecake Factory gift cards in order to not call the police on these elderly folk, you know, within the next 20 to 30 minutes. And sure, a lot of them they'll miss, but a lot of them they won't. And we'll be getting those Cheesecake Factory gift cards, or at least I would in another life. But because Wolfsky Comedy is showing Big Baller support, I don't have to do that stuff. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Eric Bay. Without their Big Baller support, I'd probably go to a casting agency and try and rent a kid for like, I don't know, 3-4 hours, and then take him to a really touristy spot, like a beach city or Vegas or something, and I'd start looking, I'd dress myself up like a homeless person, and I would just like very sadly be drinking like water, like the last couple sips of a water bottle, and then I'd have this kid go up to strangers and be like, "Excuse me, can me and my dad get $1 from you so we can have lunch?" And we'd be raking in so much money. But thanks to Eric Bay and their Big Baller support, I don't have to resort to that. I'd like to thank this week's executive producer, Average Ed. Without their Big Baller support, I'd probably be buying counterfeit Supreme in order to look cool in this episode. Actually, I did buy this from China for about 15 bucks, and it is improperly insulated, so I am going to take it off. But while I do, I'm going to go ahead and remind you to comment, like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Before we get too deep into it, I'd like to thank this week's executive producer, Colin Haley. Without his Big Baller support, I'd still be doing Murder for Hire. And thanks to him, I have not murdered anyone in months. I would like to say that this episode is executive produced by Stoned Ape Canico. Without their Big Baller support, I would probably be going to gas stations wearing some sort of official type of polo saying that, "Hey, I have an extra surround sound theater system in my trunk. The sticker price says 2,500 bucks, but I mean, whatever you want to buy it for is what I'll sell it for, because I just need the money, man, you know, I'm an honest guy." And then just kind of scam people like that. But because of Stoned Ape Canico's support, I don't have to do that. I don't know if you could tell, but we're down a ring light. And in true Hydra fashion, I've already ordered 3 more to take its place. I'd like to take this moment to thank the executive producer of this episode, Average Ed. Without the Big Baller support of Average Ed, I'd be sucking the genitals of peoples whose gender I'm not sexually attracted to. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this week's episode, Fix the Ring Light, you Without their Big Baller support, it'd be very difficult for me to put this episode out on a consistent basis. But because of Fix the Ring Light, you I am able to put this high caliber work out. But before we get into any of that, I would like to say thank you to the executive producer of this episode, Wolfsky Comedy. Without their help, I'd probably be going to festivals with like bottles of water that I bought from Kirkland and tell each person that I'm selling them for 10 bucks a bottle. And is it unethical? Yes. Would I make shit tons of money? Also yes. Would I hurt my back? Definitely. That's why I'm charging so much for water bottles. But because of Wolfsky Comedy, I don't have to do that. Comment, like, subscribe. It all helps the algorithm. And I'd also like to thank the executive producer of this episode, the one, the only, David Finkel. Without David Finkel's Big Baller support, what I'd probably be doing is, so in China, what they do is they take rhinoceros horn and they shave it down and make tea out of it. And it's kind of like an aphrodisiac. Little do they know, or I think everyone knows this, it's the exact same DNA chemical makeup of just like fingernails. So what I would do is just start collecting fingernails, boil that down, shape it into the, you know, shape of a rhino horn. I think that's what it's called. And then just kind of sell those shavings off as like Chinese aphrodisiacs. But because of David Finkel's Big Baller support, I don't need to be collecting fingernails and stuff like that. I would like to thank the executive producer of this episode, the one and only Mr. Christopher Hart. Without Christopher's help, I'd probably be posing as a plumber and just figure out different projects and then like just lowball the bids on everything. Be like, yeah, I can take care of your plumbing, no problem. Like this is what I do. Now, granted, this would be for existing houses that were probably built in the 80s, 70s, 60s, older builds. And something is now wrong with the plumbing, which is something that regularly happens. And instead of actually fixing the problem, I would just go and steal any type of copper piping that they have. Just bring that, smelt it all down into, what do they call it, ingots? I'd be melting down copper ingots and then selling it for face value. And, because of Christopher Hart, I don't have to be a deceptive plumber. So thank you for that, Christopher. And if you'd like to become a Big Baller supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Wolfski Comedy. Without the Big Baller support of Wolfski Comedy, I'd probably be taking my pre-existing back condition and working at manual labor jobs and just kind of use that to, collect and compound workers' comp disability payments, and then just kind of keep on finding different injuries to obtain till I'm a Swiss Army knife of injuries. Now would be a good time to remind you to comment, like, subscribe right now. But before we get too much into it, I'd like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Bring Back the Ring Light, You Jew. Without their Big Baller support, I'd probably need to tap into my studio art major that I got in college and start replicating fine masterpieces, and then find like a black market art dealer that can start selling these fakes to unsuspecting victims. And then probably somewhere along that line, I'll realize I don't have the skill to paint a version of the Mona Lisa that people wouldn't know isn't that. So I'd probably then find some sort of beach city, go to the pier, and start drawing caricatures of couples that are probably wildly racist and tap into all of their deepest physical flaws. But because of Bring Back the Ring Light, You Jew, I don't have to do that stuff. And I'd also like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Mr. Colin Haley. Without the help of Colin Haley, I'd probably just be texting random numbers and being like, "Hi, this is Lainey from last night. Do you remember me from the party?" And then, like, when I don't hear a response afterwards, or if I do hear a response, it's like, "What? Who is this?" I just send them, like, a nude that's like, but, like, not me. That'd be weird if it was me. Someone that looks like their name is Lainey. And then kind of, like, slowly get into that. And then once I see that they're a horny dude, guess what? Put that person's number on a database list of horny dudes that respond to texts. And then from that, I just sell it to whoever. And now they just have a database filled with horny dudes. But because of Colin Haley, I don't need to do that.